This is Conversations with Mitch Gray. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and I've got Mitch Gray on the call. Mitch, it's always good to have a conversation with you. Now, as always, I'm waiting for YouTube to say we are live streaming, and we are apparently live streaming. So this is our hopefully weekly conversation around men's mental health and mental health issues. And what's the universe telling you that we should talk about today, Mitch?
Good question. Let's see. If I was going to buy a lottery ticket, what would I bet on?
So what
Lucky
are
numbers. We need to talk
lucky
about
numbers?
lucky numbers. Yep.
Okay.
Because we talk about magic and manifestation a lot. So we need to discuss lucky numbers. And community. Let's talk about building community today, Keith.
Okay. That sounds like a good idea.
But we have to
Um,
select our lucky numbers first, five of them.
are we sharing these lucky numbers or is it five for
Yeah,
me
you
and five
pick.
for you?
No. You pick three and I'll pick two.
Okay. Are they what are the numbers 0 to 9, 1 to 100? What do we got?
Sure.
Okay, you don't really care. I'll go with 11, 22, and 33.
Okay, I'll go with five and seven. So there you
Okay,
have it,
then.
folks. Those are your
All right.
lucky numbers.
Lucky
Or better
numbers
than a
for
fortune cookie. Better
for
than a fortune cookie.
for today's lottery. Absolutely. Or your next lottery. So the Powerball jackpot is what?
I have
4,700
no idea.
million? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
If we win that, my friend, then this is all we'll do. Sit around, have coffee, and talk about cool stuff.
Well, yeah, I watch a lot of YouTube video content, probably more than I should. And it isn't a matter of luck. There's actually been studies on people who win and win more than once. There's a system because
Hmm.
it's a human made structure, the lottery and how things work. And so it's not really a matter of luck, so that you don't go into 7-Eleven and say, I'm going to choose these five numbers and this extra one. You study it. You got to work it out, and then you apply the knowledge.
Hmm.
Now, if we want to do magic, we can do that too. But as with everything in life, it's a system. And so because we are all human, we all have a way of creating these patterns in life. And so we've talked about patterns a lot.
Mhm.
And for those of us who have maladaptive behavioral patterns, it's an important
Nice
thing.
use of the word. Nice use of the word. Good job.
Maladaptive behavioral
Mhm.
patterns,
Yeah.
we need to fix those. And so one of the ways of fixing those things is to surround yourself with people
Yeah.
who may have healthier adaptive behavioral
Right.
patterns.
Right.
Mitch, how do we find the people that we need to surround ourselves with in order to live a happy, healthy, successful life? That's a big umbrella question, and I know you may not have the
Yeah.
answers to all of it, but we could definitely dive into that conversation.
Yeah, I think first of all, I wanted full disclosure. I'm still practicing this. And I will say I do have some tips that I think work. Just because I have experienced great community in my past life. But it was very church oriented, like the majority, because that's the community I grew up in. That's the culture I grew up in. So there is a natural community built into those commonalities of faith and religion and certain belief systems, which is my first tip. And that is finding interest, things that interest you, and finding groups of people that are taking part in those things. And there's all kinds of really cool ways to do that. There's apps like Meetup, where you can sign up for local interest groups, anything from book clubs to if you play music as a hobby to LARPing to whatever, science, religion, meditation. There's all kinds of things you can sign up for. So my experience in the church world, though, I really A, took it for granted, and B, have never recovered from it. I took it for granted because since it was a culture, and my family was very community oriented because we kind of all lived around each other in the same town or very close proximity.
All right.
So I was always in community with my family. that I didn't understand. That's how not how most families work now. Back in the 70s and 80s, they did, but most families now don't work that way.
Right.
B, I grew up in the church world, which was a natural community setting. And I didn't understand that once you remove yourself from those worlds, you have to rebuild a whole community. And it's like, how do you really do that? So for people that don't have those types of settings, or for someone like myself, you for healthy reasons, you remove yourself from those communities.
Hmm.
You now have to start over. And so I left the church world in 2011-ish, somewhere in there, 2012. It's been well over 10 years ago.
That's
And
not
I
a
will
real long
say,
time for adults. And that's still part of, your thinking and behavior, yeah?
yeah. Oh, it very much is. And
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work in that short period of time, but it is a long time from the standpoint of I've really been without true community since then,
Okay.
because I just haven't been able to replicate or figure out how to plug in and build that. But I do think it starts with interests. What interests do you? What hobbies do you have? What commonalities do you have? You know, someone like yourself who is a veteran of the armed forces, there are veterans groups that someone could plug into.
Mhm.
There are different community groups like Chamber of Commerce or different groups of that nature, business groups that someone could plug into. So I think it really is about finding hobby. And the reason that's important from what I've discovered is it builds an instant commonality with the people that you're engaging. So for instance, there's some speakers, for those of us that are public speakers, there are different speakers clubs that you can join. And even though you may not have much in common with these people, my son is a part of one, and he's 26 years old now, and most of the people in this group are over 50. My son is biracial. Most of the people in this group are older white men. So they're not really people that my son would engage with otherwise, but he's built a really neat small community in his life just from being a part of this monthly speakers club. And it's been really nice for him to kind of get in with people that he wouldn't otherwise have community with. And so I think it does begin with interests and hobbies, but I also think it equally begins with a vulnerability. You know, you can't build relationships without vulnerability. You can't build relationships or connection without opening yourself up to some form or type of opportunity. And I know that's kind of where I've stumbled a little bit. Again, just kind of being personal with my struggles. In the church world, we were kind of vulnerable, but it was a little bit fake because you could only be so vulnerable. So I learned actually to not be vulnerable. And so you have to kind of get past those walls. And I think as men, we're kind of that way as a blanket statement, a generality. We're not near as open and communicative as our female partners tend to be, for the most part. Again, I know it's a blanket statement, but I think most men would agree to that. So we have to kind of get past that and go, okay, I'm going to offer myself in a different way, in a way that feels dangerous, but hopefully is a safe place. And so that's the other thing to really look out for is places that are safe and where you can trust the people that are there, which wraps me back around to the interest. I think when you have a common interest with someone, you automatically feel a bit safe
Yeah.
and you feel like there's a connection that's automatically built in, which allows for more of that vulnerability.
Well, one, I've got to say, I'm really, I feel sad for you that you've lost that sense of community or the actuality of a community
Yeah.
for the past 10 years. And I know, being an adult in and of itself, you know, as we grow older, we tend to pull away from all of the relationships that we may have had, in high school or going through
Mhm.
college or as a young adult, wherever that space is, whether you're single or married with kids or whatever
Right.
that dynamic looks like. It's, like you said, it's easier to find people with some type of commonality. As we grow older, maybe not so much because then our focus is career, work,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
a football game on the Sunday afternoon, whatever that looks like. And so our ability or even the opportunity as the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for, kind of disappears. And I bring all this to, I bring all this up to say that was very much, I didn't have community, after I left the Marine Corps, so early 90s, and going and transitioning into college. So I did it kind of that way. I really didn't have a sense of community, period.
Right.
There wasn't, I was in like you, maybe not so much. I wasn't a pastor, but I identified as a Christian. And so
Hmm.
there was Christian community, in
Hmm.
college. But even at that point, I still felt out of place, misfit. And I've always kind of had that experience in my life that I never really fit in. And that, I say contributed to my 5 suicide attempts over the years. So it's really been the past 3 years that I've intentionally tried to find like-minded people
Right.
like
Right.
yourself to kind
Right.
of create that space around me so that I don't have to experience the trauma of being alone or feeling abandoned or out of place. So for
Yeah.
me, it's been an intentional. Now it's not easy, not
Sure.
by any
Sure.
stretch of the imagination. Is it easy
Yeah.
to find people that you like to hang around with, have a common
Yeah.
interest,
Yeah.
and three, feel safe enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think, what one of the other detriments that I've had is, and I've talked to other friends who are entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. Oftentimes we find a lot of community at work, and when you're a solopreneur and the team is you, you are your own community. So that's why I like to work in spaces like co-working spaces. Or years ago, with a couple of buddies of mine, we had an office space that we shared together because we were all solopreneurs, and that really helped have part of that community. So I think there is that as well. And you point to something that's very important, and that is the intentionality, because it does take a proactiveness to really build that community and open yourself up. And I think there's a part of us that, because social media is so easy, we feel like we have community because of social media, but we really don't for many people. In other words, they have a lot of connections, but no real connections. And it's like, so do you really have community? And I see that with a lot of people, especially young people. It's like, yeah, I have a lot of friends, but they're all on social media. But who do you hang out with? Like, who are you around? Like, how are they feeding you? What are you feeding them when we talk emotionally, spiritually? What are we doing to really emotionally invest in a relationship that's just based on social media? Not that it can't be done, but I do think we've become a little lazy in our relationship building because it's so easy to just follow someone on Facebook, or it's so easy to just connect with someone on LinkedIn. And it's like, no, but I want real relationships where we can go have a cup of coffee. We can watch a football game together. We can do those things, hang out together, go do yoga together, whatever that looks like. Those to me are the types of relationships that we're losing in our society. And you actually, kind of going back to my church world, church attendance is dropping at historical rates. And I think those reasons are very simple reasons. I think people are leaving the emptiness of religion. But what we also see in the studies is that the people that are leaving religious institutions are never reciprocating or replicating the community they found.
Hmm.
So at some point, it's got to come back around. And I think that's a mirror, a reflection of our society, in that we've become a little bit lazy. You look at third world countries, especially where everyone grows up in a village, and the people stay there for generations. And so they always have that sense of community. And in our new world, everyone is separated. We don't usually live near family. We usually tend to leave friends behind, like you said, that were high school, college, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to kind of tie this back to men's health that we've been talking about, I agree with you. It's in isolation that the darkness really consumes us. It's in that isolation that we don't reach out for help. And I've had so many friends tell me before, why didn't you ask? And my rebuttal often is, why weren't you present?
Mm.
Because yes, I can ask, but if you never assure me that you're a safe place, why would I ask you? And I think that's the real question. It's like I can be in relationship with you every day or often, but if I don't feel you're a safe space, why am I going to reach out to you? And so that's the question we have to begin asking ourselves is have we become lazy in our relationship building? And how can we really put intention, to your point, to that practice?
No, I know, we're talking on the edge of a couple of very sharp swords because there's a need for proaction on both sides of, the party. So, we developed a friendship early on, but a lot of it was for me, I was envious of even if it was just superficial, because at the time, you were
I was
coach,
rocking and rolling, man.
speaker. Well, I'm not
Yeah,
saying that, there's a diversion here. The
yeah,
things that I had wanted
yeah,
growing up, I actually went to school. My very first college experience was seminary. Now, I didn't last
yeah.
very long. Um, I lasted a semester, but I thought that was the calling. I thought that was the thing I needed to do.
Mhm.
Turned out it wasn't, but regardless, what I found was the continual need to find people to connect with. And so
Yeah.
when I made my fifth suicide attempt back in 2021, and you just happened to show up in a quad meet, there was a connection.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, one, I asked you if you would just be my mentor. You
Mhm.
jumped into that role rather easily. Over time, with all the conversations that we had, we became friends.
Mhm.
And with that, I have been able to not only become vulnerable in terms of, what's going on, all the crap that I deal with you, but with other people as well.
Sure.
It was like of a transition point for me to say, I found somebody I can have safe conversations with.
Yeah.
I found other people who I could have safe conversations with. And that has really been a lifesaver.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, community does save us in one form or fashion, whether it's the extreme, like the experiences you and I and many others have been through, or whether it's just something as small as celebrations and celebrating these things in life. I do believe community, and oftentimes we talk community, and we're talking, more than five or six people. But oftentimes the magic is found in the community of two or three people.
Mm.
And that's a really good thing. And so to your point, we never know what life's going to bring us. I mean, 3 years ago for both of us, life was very different. And then things happen and good, bad, or indifferent. We talk about how to be neutral on the things that happen in life, which is easier said than done. But I think that's a real magical formula is to be like, okay, well, this is where I am. So this has to be my starting point. And when we're talking about building community, I think that's the place to start is just where you are. What does it look like right now? What could you do right now? I mean, if you're watching this video or listening to this and you want to reach out to one of us, give it a shot, try it, see what happens, just to see how we can build that community moving forward.
Well, with that being step one, I got to ask you as we kind of close this conversation is what would be the, and I don't want to get too technical with it, but the strategy of
Mhm.
recreating or creating maybe for the first time, literally for me, I mean, quite literally, the first time as an adult,
Yeah.
finding the people who like-minded,
Mhm.
want to have conversation, want to kind of be part of that community, and you feel safe enough to have those true conversations. How do we strategize? How do we step
Yeah.
into, now I'm not going to ask for like a laundry list of steps, but how do we start creating that space where we feel good with other people?
Yeah, three things. Number one, start with your interests and hobbies, whatever that looks like. Find people that have those things in common. If your interest is watching NFL football, go to a restaurant or somewhere that they show games and go watch a game. You'll meet people there that have common interests. If your hobby is knitting, go to a senior center and help teach old people how to knit or knit with them because there's a tie-in community there. So start with your interests or hobbies. Number two, be curious. I think that's where we often as adults miss it. And we've talked about that in the past, how as young children, we're really curious about the world and we lose that. So be curious, find something new, learn something new, jump in, take a college class, do something to get yourself around people through curiosity. And number three, take a chance. I mean, at some point, you've just got to take a chance and just see what happens. You did that when you reached out to me. The group that you referenced that no longer exists, Quad Meets, that was
Quad
such a
meets.
great platform to build community. And I still have contact with many people I met through Quad Meets. But we used our curiosity. We all had a common interest, and we took a chance. And so to me, those would be the best first three steps.
And so, given that, I just want to give an example of how this has kind of worked for me rather recently. So, every once in a while, we talk about my craziness and my daily 12 plus mile hikes.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, 2024, so I will date the conversation. I've pushed my, and again, if anybody's watching this for the first time, my intention is to do a through hike of the Appalachian Trail. Now, the initial goal was 2025, but Hurricane Helene kind of disrupted the lives of many people in North Carolina, in the high country, and in Southern Virginia. So, out of respect for the people who are rebuilding their lives, I'm postponing my through hike until 2026. But I say all that to say that my Sundays have been spent pushing my physical body, my mental capacity, my spiritual, God help me, my spiritual limits to a 20 plus mile hike in a day. And so literally spending 7, 8 hours with a 35-pound pack on my back in state parks across Virginia. And here locally, there's a state park called False, False, False Cape. Don't really get that, but it is what it is. Um, I passed by a group of people who were easily, I'm 55, so easily my age, if not in that vicinity. And, I always get that look, but we started a really brief conversation. And then what it turns out in terms of community is locally, I'm considered, there's lots of colloquialisms, in terms of what we call ourselves, Hampton Roads, Virginia, the 757, which is our area code, or the Tidewater area. And so there's actually a community of people either who want to be, well, who have hiked or want to hike the Appalachian Trail. Now, I'm not saying the entire, the through hike, but who have experienced the AT, and they said you got to join. So I joined what's called the Tidewater Appalachian Trail Club. So TATC.org. So if you're out there
Nice,
and if you're in the
nice.
the Eastern Virginia part of the world, I invite you to join the Tidewater Appalachian Trail Club.
That's a perfect example. That's a perfect example. Running clubs, just any type of hobby that you can plug into is a great way to find community. Yeah.
So, Mitch, as always, I do appreciate your time and the conversation. For those of you who've been watching and listening, we'll see you next time. Take care.